Class dismissed. Please exit the room in an orderly fashion and review chapters 5 and 6 in the handbook. You will be tested on your lying capabilities in the coming days, and if I hear so much as a quiver in your tone, you'll be cleaning the community blade collection for the next month. You should be aware that dawdling does nothing for me, so either split or spit it out, kid. I got a lot of tests to grade, and needless to say, you certainly took that lesson in subtle intimidation tactics to heart. How I knew my darling was my darling. That's a rather personal question. I'm sure you could find somebody more open to discuss such matters if that's the conversation you're looking to have. All right, I'll acquiesce, but nothing of the story leaves this room. I love my wife dearly, and I've mentioned her before to the class as a whole, but she is not to be shared. Not her spirit, not her life, not her. Especially without her knowledge. Does that sound fair to you? I think I was a little older than you when I first met her, attending classes at this very school. Of course, not this class. At the time, there was no class to assist those of us with our specific personality deficits. We just lived our lives and had to deal with the perpetual cycle of sinking or swimming socially, as we did what we could to mask the more unsightly parts of our personality. I think that kind of explains the everything about me now on some level. Wearing a mask of your own face is, sure, still your face, but nonetheless, still a mask. Having the ability to turn your emotions on and off like a light switch is a truly horrifying thing for a lot of people. Even she found it a bit. But I was used to it, so it didn't matter all that much to me. A lot of it didn't matter until her. My light, my life, my Emily. I still remember that first day I met her because she sat on the desk by the windowsill, just 3 or so feet away from mine. And I could swear that I was looking at the sun. Her skin was as dark as the night sky, and her hair was white like moonlight. But in her face, her eyes, her smile, there was nothing but sun, but radiance, but warmth. That was when I knew I loved her. Does that help you? At the time, no, she was not what I would call my darling. I didn't even have the words to conceptualize her as my darling, or even as an infatuation. I never liked anybody before her, and I haven't liked anybody since her. I call myself a lesbian, as I'm more drawn to women in the female form on an aesthetic level, as well as socially and emotionally, but romantically and sexually speaking, I'm effectively Emily-sexual, but to be fair, I think anybody would say that about their partners if they really love them enough, hence, lesbian. But I didn't have those words at the time, or any conceptualization of my own feelings on a basic level, let alone in an abstract sense. So I just assumed I wanted to be her friend. Her best, most special, most involved friend. But a friend nonetheless. So I performed many of the tactics I teach in this very class today to try to make myself a fixture of her life. Taking out lab partners and skewing group projects in my favor, sitting at her lunch table, always being around to fix whatever disaster that might have befallen her on any given day. You know, the basics. And soon enough, I was indeed her best friend, and then yada yada yada, we got married. Isn't that enough for you, you vulture? Fine. If this is really so important to your social and emotional development, I'll tell you. But if a single word of this conversation leaves this classroom, I'll get you in those very hallways like the spineless fish you are and make you howl like the feral animal you aren't. Is that clear? So, Emily was my best friend. And it was great. But it wasn't great. It just wasn't enough. She was the cool drink of water I didn't know I was looking for after years spent in the arid desert of isolation. And now that I had her, I didn't just want to drink it. I wanted to drown. Every touch was too much, but not enough. Every word left a lasting impact on my psyche, but left when she opened her mouth again, and every laugh that tinkled like 100 little bells echoed through my bones during every waking moment. It was suffocating, this feeling. I could have hated it, but I wanted to gag. I wanted to choke on it. She had transformed my entire life from the sullen loner to somebody people noticed. Somebody people liked. Somebody people admired. But I hardly noticed. I hardly noticed at all. How can you gaze upon another star and think it's just as beautiful when the sun is right there? This is a long and admittedly needless way for me to say that as I grew closer to Emily, I grew to have admirers too. Nobody's as genuine as my devotion to Emily, of course, so it might as well have been nothing but more than a cruel little distraction or a horrible, stupid joke, but nonetheless, one day, somebody was at least showing their potential for devotion when one day I found a letter. A love letter on my seat where I sat every day mooning over Emily, unaware that there might have been somebody mooning over me. Of course, I told Emily about it and showed her the note. I tell Emily everything. I offer up the whole of my life for a fraction of hers, and it's still far, far more than I deserve. She was flippant about it. In retrospect, quite evasive, saying that if this special somebody, this secret admirer, really loved me as much as they claimed to, they would tell me outright. I was just sad that the confession didn't seem to come from her based on how loudly and openly she slammed it, but it quickly faded from my mind, as all things that didn't involve my Emily did. I guess I guess I still hoped, despite it all, regardless, that Emily wrote the note. It didn't look like her handwriting, but that kind of thing is so easy to mask that it's in the introduction of your textbook. And she must have had her own personal reasons for slamming something that, on its own, was purposelessly quaint, but under her pen became the words that can only be spoken of by the most virtuous of the silver-tongued. But no. I think it was some kid named Willie Clark. All I knew about him really was that he was a clown of a kid, always making scenes and telling jokes and interrupting class. There's only 2 reasons I even remember him to this day. 1, Emily hated him. She found him disruptive and destructive and never as funny as he thought he was. And I took note, because I take note of all facets of Emily's personality and taste. And as for 2, did you know that this kid was so committed to the joke, the bit of it all, that one day he wrote me a letter telling me to meet him after school? He even left me a bouquet of flowers. But Emily and I knew what he was scheming. I don't think anybody could have loved me, and I don't think anybody could have loved me as much as I love Emily, so it had to be a trap, a practical joke, a prank. Those kind of things didn't happen to people like me. But I couldn't have him distracting me with his incessant need to pine, so I went to meet him at his so-called meeting place, like he asked of me. Loaded with rose petals because he's clearly only doing it for the joke of it all, so he might as well play it up. I could understand why Emily thought he was grating, of course. Everybody was compared to her, but yes, he was more grating than on average. But then I rounded the corner and saw his crumpled bouquet. And that was when I realized that maybe this was less of a joke than it first appeared to be. Tacky, sure, but not as funny as it could have once been. And then I heard him sob. And then I looked up. And there I saw her, glowing in the afternoon sun with her strong legs wrapped around his torso, pinning him in place, her beautiful white box braids swaying gently in the breeze. And then I saw her plunge a knife straight through his throat, and then she yanked it out with such vigor that the blood erupted from his throat like a gorgeous geyser of crimson. She looked so stunning, marred by the evidence of her crime. But then she saw me. She saw me. And I think for the first time she really saw me. And then she began to panic. Every step I took forward, she took back. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to describe why she did the thing that she did. That he attacked her first, that he didn't have good intentions, that his gang was just waiting to get in on the action, that all these reasons for why she did the horrible thing that she did, the thing that was only beautiful to me. But I knew why she did it. She just had to see that I knew. So I ran. I ran towards her, and before she could turn around and begin her real running gait, I slammed into her and we kissed. I'm not going to give you the intimate details of that. Those are mine alone to hold dear. But yeah, the moment we locked eyes, the moment we kissed, the hug we shared after we hit the body, that was when I knew that this wasn't a normal crush, that this wasn't just really, really close friends. That was when I knew we were meant to live for each other and die for each other for the sake of such bliss. And I really couldn't be happier. But what does this have to do with your question? Your big prying question of how do you know when you see the love of your life? I can't know if I really lent you any clarity if I don't know what the question is. So, come on, out with it. Clock's ticking. So you think you might be gay, like me, and you wanted to talk to me because I'm the only openly gay teacher at this school. Congratulations. Congratulations. Good. Congrats on your gay. I'm sorry, I don't know exactly what to say here. Nobody was there to validate my identity crisis, and it's not like my sector of the community has been as so much as unwelcoming, as much as I don't talk to many people outside of this job, so I don't know exactly what words to use, but you're good to me. You're good. You're fine. You're allowed to feel these things, and it's good to. I can find you some resources, some pamphlets, maybe a few gay authors you could read to help you understand these feelings. Does the knowledge that if anybody gives you hell for this, my wife and I are willing to say a few words to them that'll probably get them in a body bag before the end of the week? I don't know what you're looking for. Look, I'm not here to be anybody's queer elder, alright? I'm, 32. And I only put in the barest bone research in recent years just to make my teaching material more inclusive, but if you're really so invested in learning more about this for the sake of your own darling, I'd be willing to assist you. Stop crying. I don't care if you're gay. Go to your next class. You still have to do homework if you're gay, and I do not care at all if you kids try calling it a gay-on-gay crime. Well, let's see how true that fast-walking stereotype really is. Chop chop.